The blade stopped 3 inches from my throat when the child screamed. I had been kneeling on the cold obsidian floor of the Vaelori throne room for 6 hours, waiting for the High Matriarch to decide whether my execution would be public or private. The guards had stripped me of my translator, my comm unit, and what little dignity a human ambassador's aide could claim in an empire that considered my species one evolutionary step above livestock. "You can't kill my human!" The words echoed through the vaulted chamber, silencing the murmuring council members. I didn't need a translator to understand them. The child had spoken in standard, her accent thick but her meaning unmistakable. High Matriarch Saraval's ceremonial blade wavered. Her 4 eyes, each the deep purple of dying stars, shifted from my exposed neck to the small figure that had burst through the chamber doors. "Daughter," Saraval said, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that made Vaelori's speech so difficult for humans to replicate. "Return to your quarters." The girl, she couldn't have been older than 8 in human years, though Vaelori aged differently, planted herself directly between me and her mother. Her silver skin was flushed with violet, the Vaelori equivalent of a blush or perhaps fury. The ceremonial robes she wore were too large, dragging on the floor around her bare feet. "He is mine," the child declared. "By the old laws. I claimed him." A ripple of shock moved through the assembled nobles. I saw hands reach for weapons, saw ceremonial masks slip to reveal expressions I couldn't read. "Impossible," spat Lord Cavith, the matriarch's chief advisor. His elongated form unfolded from his seat, 3 meters of iridescent scales, and barely concealed contempt. "A child cannot invoke the right of keeping. And certainly not for a human. The laws do not specify age." The child's voice didn't waver. "Or species." I stayed very still. 6 months ago, I had been a xenolinguistics graduate student with a mountain of debt and a dead-end research position. Then the Vaelori Ascendancy had arrived at Earth's doorstep, and suddenly humanity needed every warm body it could find for its hastily assembled diplomatic corps. 3 weeks ago, I had been assigned to assist Ambassador Chen on Vaelor Prime. 2 weeks ago, Ambassador Chen had accidentally insulted the High Matriarch's honor during a formal dinner by sitting before being invited. 1 week ago, Ambassador Chen had been executed. As the lowest-ranking member of the diplomatic team, I had been deemed responsible for my superior's failures. Vaelori justice was nothing if not thorough. "Lira," the matriarch said, and I heard something in her voice that surprised me, not anger, but exhaustion. "You do not understand what you are doing. I understand perfectly." The child, Lira, turned to face me for the first time. Her eyes were lighter than her mother's, almost lavender, and there was a fierce intelligence in them that made me reconsider my estimate of her age. "Do you accept my claim, human?" "My name is Marcus Cole," I said quietly. My throat was dry. "And I don't know what I would be accepting." "Your life," Lira said simply. "In exchange for service. You would become my kept, my property, in your terms, though the relationship is more complex than that word implies. You would be bound to me until I release you or die. My status would protect you from execution." She tilted her head. "It is not a good bargain for you. But it is better than dying." "The council will never ratify this," Cavith hissed. "The council does not need to ratify the old laws," Lira replied without looking at him. "They simply are." Saraval lowered her blade. I watched her study her daughter with an expression I was beginning to recognize as reluctant pride, mixed with profound concern. "If I accept," I said slowly, "what happens to you?" Something flickered across Lira's face. Surprise, perhaps. "What do you mean? Your people clearly despise humans. If you claim me, what does that do to your standing, your future?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "That is not your concern," Lira said finally. "It is if I accept." I met her eyes. "I won't buy my survival with a child's future." More murmuring from the council. Cavith looked like he had swallowed something sour. Even Saraval seemed momentarily taken aback. "You would rather die than inconvenience me?" Lira asked. "I would rather die than let you destroy yourself to save a stranger." For a long moment, the child simply stared at me. Then she did something that shocked the entire assembly more than her initial intervention. She laughed. "Perhaps," she said softly, "you are worth keeping after all." She turned to face her mother, her small shoulders squared. "I invoke the right of keeping. I claim this human Marcus Cole as my own. I accept full responsibility for his actions and his care. By my blood and my honor, I bind him to my house." The matriarch closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were unreadable. "So be it," she said. "The laws are clear. The human lives." She sheathed her blade. "But know this, daughter, you have chosen a difficult path. I cannot protect you from its consequences." "I know, mother." Lira's voice was calm. I have been walking difficult paths since father died. One more will not break me. The chamber erupted into chaos, but I barely heard it. I was watching the small girl who had just saved my life, wondering what I had gotten myself into, and why she had done it. Why would a Vaelori princess, daughter of the most powerful ruler in 3-star systems, risk everything for a human she had never met? The quarters they assigned me were small but clean, a servant's room in the eastern wing of the palace, far from the royal suites, but close to Lira's private study. I was given a new translator chip, basic clothing in the Vaelori style, and a list of rules longer than my arm. The most important rule: I was never to leave Lira's presence without permission. As her kept, I existed in a legal gray area, not quite a slave, not quite a servant, not quite a person. My status derived entirely from her, and without her nearby, I was once again subject to the regular laws regarding humans, which meant execution for any of 1,000 minor infractions. I spent my first 3 days learning the layout of the palace and trying to understand Vaelori customs through observation. Lira summoned me only twice, once to confirm I had received adequate supplies, once to inform me that I would begin tutoring her in human languages and culture. Why? I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. Your standard is already excellent. Adequate, she corrected. Not excellent. There are nuances I miss. Idioms that escape me. I intend to understand your people, Marcus Cole. All of them. May I ask why? She considered the question longer than I expected. Because my mother conquered your world through superior force. I would prefer to rule it through superior understanding. You plan to rule humanity? I plan to rule the Ascendancy, she said matter-of-factly. Humanity is part of the Ascendancy now, whether either party likes it or not. A ruler who does not understand her subjects is a tyrant. I do not wish to be a tyrant. It was, I realized, the most politically astute thing I had ever heard an 8-year-old say. Or perhaps her age equivalent was closer to 12 or 14 in terms of cognitive development. Vaelori maturation was something I desperately needed to research. Our lessons began the following morning. I had expected resistance. A princess forced to learn from her pet human would surely resent the situation. Instead, I found Lira to be an almost aggressively dedicated student. She absorbed vocabulary like a sponge, asked probing questions about grammar and syntax, and demanded that I explain every idiom and cultural reference I used. Why do humans say, break a leg when they wish someone success? She asked, during our 3rd session. Is it a threat disguised as encouragement? It's theatrical superstition, I explained. Actors believed that wishing someone good luck would actually bring bad luck, so they said the opposite. Illogical. Most human customs are, when you examine them closely. She made a note on her tablet. And yet you cling to them. They connect us to our past, to each other. I hesitated. Do the Vaelori not have similar traditions? We have the laws, Lira said. They are not superstition. They are the foundation of our civilization. The old laws? Like the one you used to save me? Her stylus stopped moving. Yes. Where did they come from? From the first matriarch, at the founding of the Ascendancy. They were written in blood and honor, meant to ensure that power could never be divorced from responsibility. She set down the tablet. The right of keeping was originally used by warrior queens to claim defeated enemies. By binding an enemy to your house, you made their welfare your concern. It prevented wanton slaughter after battles. And now? Now it is rarely invoked. Most Vaelori consider it archaic. She met my eyes. My grandmother used it once, to claim a rival who had tried to assassinate her. She kept him as her advisor for 40 years. He eventually became her most trusted counselor. What happened to him? He died defending her from a different assassin. Lira's voice was carefully neutral. She never took another kept. She said the loss was too great. I processed this slowly. Is that why you chose the right? Because of your grandmother's example? Partially. She stood, moving to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. The light from Vaelor's twin suns painted her silver skin in shades of gold and amber. And partially because I have watched my mother's court for 3 years, and I have learned that everyone in it wants something from me. Power, gay, influence, alliance. And I don't. She turned back to me, and for a moment she looked impossibly young. You wanted to die rather than harm me. No one has wanted that since my father. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing, which seemed to be the right choice. Come, she said, the moment of vulnerability passing as quickly as it had appeared. I wish to learn about human music. My tutors say it is chaotic and primitive, but I have heard recordings that suggest otherwise. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Mornings were for language lessons. Afternoons, Lira spent with her other tutors, combat, politics, history, while I was permitted to use the palace library. Evenings she often summoned me to her study for what she called cultural exchanges, but what I suspected were her only opportunities for genuine conversation. The Vaelori court, I learned, was a lonely place for a fatherless princess. Lira's father had been Prince Consort Tivol, a warrior from a minor noble house who had won the matriarch's heart through valor and wit. His death in a border skirmish when Lira was 4 had fundamentally altered the political landscape. Without a male heir, Vaelori's succession favored daughters. Lira was now the sole inheritor of the Ascendancy's throne, which made her simultaneously invaluable and vulnerable. "They want me to choose a consort," she told me one evening, her voice bitter. "Lord Cavith has presented no fewer than 12 candidates, all from powerful houses, all with fathers who would very much like to see their bloodlines on the throne. You're too young to marry," I said, then caught myself. "Aren't you? By our laws, I can be formally betrothed at the blooming, our equivalent of puberty. The actual marriage would not occur until I reached my majority at the flowering. But a betrothal is binding. It would grant my future consort's family significant influence over my education and development. That seems like a bad system. It is an old system." She shrugged. "Old systems often are. Can you refuse? For now." My mother has some sympathy for my position. She was forced into an early betrothal herself before she became matriarch. But her sympathy has limits. The council presses her constantly, because they're afraid of what you might become without their influence. Lira's smile was sharp. "You are learning to think like a Vaelori, Marcus Cole." I am not certain that is a compliment. She was right. I was learning, and I was beginning to understand why an 8-year-old princess had risked everything to claim a condemned human. I wasn't just a political liability she had adopted out of kindness. I was a statement. Lira had chosen the most outcast, most despised creature in the Ascendancy and declared him hers. In doing so, she had demonstrated both her knowledge of the old laws and her willingness to use them in unconventional ways. She had shown the council that she could not be easily controlled. And she had acquired the one thing no noble advisor could offer, a perspective from outside the Vaelori hierarchy. "You're using me," I said during one of our evening sessions. She didn't deny it. "Yes. Does that bother you? Does it bother you?" I considered the question honestly. Less than it should, probably. I'm alive because of you. And I'm learning things no human has ever known about the Vaelori. If I ever return to my people, that knowledge could be invaluable. You wish to return to humanity, eventually? Don't you wish to be free of me? Her expression became unreadable. The right of keeping can only be ended in 3 ways. I release you, I die, or you save my life in a manner deemed equivalent to the claim. Then I'll save your life, I said simply. She studied me for a long moment. You say that as though it would be easy. I say it as though it matters. I leaned forward. You gave me my life, Lira. That's not something I take lightly. If there's ever an opportunity to repay that debt, I will take it. Not because I want to leave, but because you deserve to have given your protection freely, not as an obligation. Something shifted in her lavender eyes. You are a strange creature, Marcus Cole. I've been told. It was not an insult. I know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my narrow bed, staring at the unfamiliar constellations visible through my window, and tried to understand what was happening to me. I should have been terrified. I was property, in everything but name, bound to a child princess in an empire that viewed my species as barely sentient. My life could be ended on a whim, my freedom was non-existent, and I had no way to contact Earth or anyone who might help me. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: purpose. In my old life, I had been adrift. My parents had died in the climate riots of 47, leaving me alone at 19 with a mountain of medical debt and no direction. I had fallen into xenolinguistics because it was the only scholarship available, not out of any particular passion. I had joined the diplomatic corps because it paid well and I had nothing better to do. Now, for the first time, I was needed. Genuinely needed, not as a warm body to fill a role, but as myself. Lira had chosen me, specifically me, and while her reasons were partially political, I had seen the loneliness in her eyes. She was a child carrying the weight of an empire, and I was the only person in her life who expected nothing from her but honesty. It wasn't much, but maybe it was enough. The assassination attempt came 3 months later. I had grown complacent, I would later realize. The palace had begun to feel almost like home, as much as a gilded cage could feel like home. Lira's language skills had improved dramatically, and our conversations had expanded beyond cultural exchange into something approaching genuine friendship. She had begun to smile when she saw me. I hadn't realized how rare her smiles were until I started earning them. The attack happened during one of Lira's combat training sessions. I was permitted to observe. My presence seemed to amuse her instructor, a scarred warrior named Seleth, who viewed me with the same contempt most Vaelori reserved for my species. Your pet? Watch us closely, Seleth remarked as she circled Lira on the training mat. Does it hope to learn our techniques? Lira corrected, parrying a strike. And he is not my pet. The laws would disagree. The laws are more complex than your interpretation suggests. Seleth's next attack was faster, harder. Lira blocked it, but barely. Your softness will be your downfall, young matriarch. A ruler cannot afford sentiment. A ruler cannot afford ignorance, Lira countered. Which of us has learned more of our enemies in the past 3 months? You, with your blade? Or me, with my human? I saw Seleth's expression shift. At the time, I thought it was simple anger at being corrected by a child. I was wrong. The blade that emerged from Seleth's sleeve was not a training weapon. It was a monofilament needle, thin as a hair and sharper than anything I had ever seen. Vaelori assassination tools were legendary. They could pass through conventional scanners, undetected, and leave wounds that appeared to be natural organ failure. I didn't think. I moved. Later, Palace security would analyze the recordings and express disbelief that a human could have reacted quickly enough to intercept the strike. They would theorize that I must have had prior warning, that I had been complicit in the attempt somehow. They were wrong about the complicity. But they were right that I shouldn't have been able to move that fast. I have no explanation for what happened. One moment I was seated against the wall, 20 feet from the mat. The next, I was between Seleth and Lira, the needle buried in my shoulder instead of the princess's throat. The pain was extraordinary. The monofilament had passed through muscle and bone like they weren't there, and something in the blade's coating set my nerves on fire. I heard myself screaming distantly, as though the sound came from someone else. Then Lira's hand was on my face, her cool silver fingers against my burning skin, and she was saying something in Vaelori too fast for my translator to process. Don't, I managed. Get back. Might be more, there are no more. Her voice was calm, impossibly calm for a child who had just watched her guardian take a blade meant for her. Seleth acted alone. My mother's guard has already subdued her. I tried to respond, but the poison on the blade was working its way through my system, and the world was beginning to gray at the edges. Stay awake, Lira commanded. Marcus, look at me. Stay awake. Trying, I whispered. Try harder. Her grip on my face tightened. You do not have permission to die. I have not released you. The right is still in effect. Pretty sure. Poison doesn't care. About laws. Then, I will make it care. She turned her head, shouting orders in rapid Vaelori. I caught fragments. Medical team, antidote, faster, now. And then the darkness took me. I woke in the palace medical wing, surrounded by technology that made human medicine look like witch doctoring. A Vaelori physician was studying my vitals with an expression of grudging interest. You should be dead, she informed me. The poison Seleth used has no antidote. It dissolves neural tissue within minutes of exposure. And yet I'm not dead, I observed, my voice rough. No, I can't see. The physician's confusion was evident. Your immune system mounted a response we have never seen in any species. It adapted, created antibodies to a compound that should have been impossible to counter. She tilted her head. Human biology is more resilient than our records indicate. We're stubborn, I said. It's a species trait. The door opened before she could respond. Lira entered, flanked by 2 guards who looked deeply uncomfortable with her insistence on visiting a human patient. Leave us, she said. Your Highness, one guard began. The council has decreed. I said, leave us. They left. Lira approached my bed slowly, her expression unreadable. She was wearing formal robes instead of her training clothes, which told me significant time had passed since the attack. How long was I unconscious? I asked. 3 days. She stopped at the edge of the bed, close enough to touch, but not touching. The physicians were preparing your body for disposal when your heart restarted. Sorry to disappoint them. Do not jest. Her voice cracked just slightly. You nearly died. I did die, apparently. The disposal thing implies, do not jest. Dut. I fell silent. For a long moment, Lira simply stood there, her hands clenched at her sides. Then, with a movement that seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised me, she sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand in hers. Her skin was cool, smooth, slightly metallic to the touch. I had never been this close to a Vaelori before. I had certainly never held one's hand. You saved my life, she said quietly. Seemed like the thing to do. The right is satisfied. Her grip tightened. By the old laws, you are free. I have no further claim on you. I processed this slowly, still foggy from whatever medications were coursing through my system. So I can leave. You can leave. She didn't look at me. My mother has already prepared a transport. You will be returned to Earth as a diplomatic gesture. Your survival and heroism will be spun appropriately for both our peoples. And you? What about me? What happens to you, Lira? Seleth was your combat instructor. Someone at court arranged this. That someone is still out there. That is not your concern. You are no longer bound to me. I wasn't asking as you're kept. I squeezed her hand back, gently. I was asking as your friend. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something I had never seen in them before. Tears. Vaelori tears were silver, like everything else about them, and they caught the light of the medical monitors like tiny stars. I do not have friends, she whispered. I have allies, subjects, and enemies. That is the nature of power. Then, make an exception. Why would you stay? The question burst out of her like something she had been holding back for days. You can go home. You can return to your people, your world, everything you lost. Why would you choose this place? These people who despise you? Me? Because you chose me, I said simply, when everyone told you not to. When it cost you everything. You chose me anyway, and you never asked for anything in return, except honesty. I asked for language lessons. Those were fun. A laugh escaped her, wet and surprised. You are impossible, I've been told. I shifted on the bed, wincing as the movement pulled at my wound. Look, I'm not saying I want to stay forever, but I'm not leaving while you're in danger. The right might be satisfied, but my conscience isn't. Your conscience is inconvenient. Another species trait. She was quiet for a long time, her hand still in mine. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I was afraid, she said. When you fell, when the poison took you, I was more afraid than I have ever been, even more than when Seleth attacked. The attack was expected, on some level. I have known since my father died, that there are those who would see me destroyed, rather than see me rule. But you, she shook her head. I did not expect to care whether you lived or died. You were supposed to be a political tool, a statement. And now I do not know what you are. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the child she still was beneath all the politics and power, except that I do not want you to leave. I thought about Earth, about the mountains of debt waiting for me, the dead-end career, the loneliness that had defined my existence since my parents' deaths. I thought about Lira, 8 years old, and already fighting for her survival in a court full of predators. Then I'll stay, I said. Her grip on my hand tightened almost painfully. You mean that? I do. I met her eyes. But we do this differently. Not as keeper and kept. As partners. Equals. I help you navigate the court, and you help me understand your people. We watch each other's backs. The council will never accept a human as my equal. Then, we change the council's mind. Or we work around them. Either way, we do it together. For the first time since I had met her, Lira smiled. Not the sharp, political smile she used on her mother's court, but something genuine. Something young and hopeful. Together, she repeated, I like that word. The years that followed were not easy. The council resisted my presence at every turn, launching investigation after investigation into my background, my loyalties, my very humanity. Lord Cavith, in particular, seemed convinced that I was an elaborate Earth intelligence operation, though what intelligence I could possibly gather for a species that posed no threat to the Ascendancy remained unclear. But Lira grew. She shot up like a weed during her blooming, reaching nearly 2 meters by the time she was 12 in human years. Her mind sharpened with age, cutting through political machinations with an ease that made even her mother take notice. And through it all, I was there, tutoring her in human languages and culture. Yes, but also serving as a sounding board, a confidant, a check on her worst impulses. You're too merciful, I told her after she pardoned a noble caught embezzling from the treasury. He'll see it as weakness, perhaps, she acknowledged. Or perhaps he'll see it as an investment. A ruler who shows mercy earns loyalty. One who rules through fear earns only obedience. Those sound like my words. They were. I've had time to consider them. She had listened. She had always listened, even when she pretended not to. The assassination attempts decreased after the first year, partially because Lira's security improved, partially because her growing reputation made her a less appealing target. A princess who had claimed a human, and somehow emerged stronger from the scandal, was not to be trifled with. A princess who had survived 3 more attempts on her life, each foiled by a combination of her own skills and her human partner's unexpected instincts, was downright dangerous. You shouldn't have intervened, she scolded me after the last attempt, a poisoning that I had detected through nothing more than the slight discoloration of her wine. If you had been wrong, you would have insulted the host grievously. But I wasn't wrong. But you could have been. Then, I would have apologized. I shrugged. Some things are worth the risk. She gave me a look that I had learned to recognize over the years, exasperation mixed with something deeper, something she still couldn't quite name. When Lira reached her flowering at 16, the pressure to choose a consort intensified. The council presented candidate after candidate, each more politically advantageous than the last. She rejected them all. None of them see me, she told me one evening, standing on the balcony of her private chambers. She was tall enough now that we were nearly eye to eye, her childhood softness replaced by the angular elegance of Vaelori adulthood. They see the throne, the power, the alliance. Not one of them has ever asked what I think about anything that matters. What do you think about? I asked. The things that matter? She turned to face me, and in the light of the twin moons, her silver skin glowed like something holy. I think about the future, she said. About what kind of empire I want to build. About whether conquest is truly the only path to greatness, or whether there might be another way. She paused. I think about humanity, and what role your people might play in a more just ascendancy. That's very political. I am a political creature. She smiled. But I also think about less strategic matters. Music, art, the way human poetry captures emotions that Vaelori, verse considers too raw to express. Her voice softened. I think about you, Marcus. More than I should. My heart, which should have been used to her directness by now, stuttered in my chest. Lira, I know. She held up a hand. The complications are endless. You are human. I am to be matriarch. The council would never accept you as my consort, and even suggesting it would destroy what little political capital we have built. Then why mention it? Because I am tired of unspoken things. She took a step toward me. Because in 8 years you have never once treated me as anything other than your equal. Because when I am with you, I do not feel the weight of the crown I have not yet worn. That's not a reason to let me finish. Another step. We were close enough now that I could see the subtle variations in her lavender eyes, the flecks of deeper purple that appeared when her emotions ran high. I am not proposing anything. I am not asking for anything. I am simply telling you the truth, because you have always given me the same courtesy. The truth, I repeated. The truth is that you are the first person since my father who has made me feel safe. Her hand rose, hovering near my face without quite touching. The truth is that I would have died 3 times over without you, and not just from assassins. You have saved me from becoming the cold, calculating ruler that my advisors wanted me to be. You would never have become that. It's not in your nature. You say that with such certainty. Her fingertips brushed my cheek, cool and impossibly gentle. How can you know? Because I know you. I caught her hand, held it against my face. I've known you since you were a child standing between me and a blade, declaring me yours with the stubbornness of a princess and the courage of a warrior. That person was never going to become anything but extraordinary. Marcus. My name in her voice had never sounded like that before, like a prayer, like a promise. We can't, I said, even as I didn't let go of her hand. You're right that the complications are endless. The council, your mother, the entire political structure of the Ascendancy. I don't care. You have to care. You're going to rule. I don't care. She kissed me. It was awkward at first. Our anatomies were similar but not identical, and neither of us had any experience in this particular form of cross-species diplomacy. But her lips were soft despite their metallic sheen, and when I stopped thinking about all the reasons this was a terrible idea, I found that it felt like coming home. When we finally pulled apart, she was smiling. That was highly improper, I observed. It was, she agreed. Are you going to report me to the council and admit that a human was kissed by the future matriarch? They'd execute me out of pure disbelief. She laughed, the real laugh, the one I'd worked for years to earn. Then it will be our secret. For now. For now, she agreed. But someday, Marcus Cole, someday I will change the laws that say a matriarch cannot choose her own heart. And on that day, I will choose you in front of the entire Ascendancy, and no one will dare to object. That's a bold claim. I am the daughter of Saraval the Conqueror, and Tivil the Valiant. She drew herself up, to her full height, every inch the ruler she would one day become. I claimed a condemned human with nothing but my knowledge of the old laws, and my refusal to watch injustice prevail. Do you truly believe there is anything I cannot do? Looking at her then, bathed in moonlight and certainty, I found that I believed her completely. No, I said. I don't. She kissed me again, softer this time, and I held her as the moons tracked across the sky and the future stretched out before us, uncertain, dangerous, and absolutely worth fighting for. When we finally separated, she took my hand and led me back inside, away from the eyes of guards and courtiers and political necessity. And in the privacy of her chambers, with no one to judge and no laws to bind us, we sat together on her couch, her head against my shoulder, her fingers intertwined with mine. "Tell me a human story," she said softly. "Something with a happy ending. Happy endings are rarer in human stories than you might think. Then tell me one anyway. I want to believe they're possible." I thought for a moment. Then I began to speak, weaving together a tale of two people from different worlds who found each other against all odds. It wasn't any story I had read or heard before. It was ours, reimagined as a fable. A child who stood against an empire for a stranger. A stranger who stayed when he could have left. A bond that grew from political calculation into something neither of them expected. By the time I finished, Lira was asleep against my shoulder, her breathing deep and even, her face more peaceful than I had ever seen it. I stayed awake a while longer, watching the stars through her window and thinking about the girl who had screamed, "You can't kill my human," in a throne room full of enemies. She had been right, I realized. She had claimed me that day, bound me with laws older than either of our civilizations. But somewhere along the way, I had claimed her too. And nothing, not councils, or assassins or the vast gulf between our species, was ever going to change that. I pressed a kiss to the top of her head, careful not to wake her, and finally allowed myself to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The council would scheme, enemies would plot, and the weight of two civilizations would press down on us from all sides. But tonight, in this room, we were just two people who had found each other in the darkness. And that, I decided, was enough. It would always be enough.